Hey everybody, welcome back to the Krav Stuff podcast, episode number 2. Hope you guys enjoyed episode number 1. Didn't have much of a script. I had a lot of ums in there, and I'm probably still gonna have a lot of ums in this just because I want it to be like you and I are just sitting down in my office chatting. But I wanted to talk about with this episode, like, why did I choose Krav? Krav Maga for me, at that point in time in my life, I talked about it in the previous episode. Maybe I didn't go into enough detail about the fact that I was very insecure, very depressed, and Krav gave me something that helped to kind of lift me up out of that a little bit. My background, I grew up with a lot of abuse. My father was a rough guy. He really was. It was not a super fun childhood. I mean, I had an okay upbringing, I guess, but there was a lot of violence involved. And for those of you out there that have experienced that, you carry that trauma with you forever. And you have to find ways to deal with that and for ways to have some post-traumatic recovery, because abuse is, it causes PTSD, especially when we're young, I was, the abuse was as far back as I could remember, very, very young, 5, 6, 7, all the way up until, when I graduated from high school, there was abuse, different levels of it, but there was still abuse. So that carried with me. So I was a very angry, I was a very insecure young man, and Krav Maga gave me something that I didn't know I needed at that point in time. That's what I share with a lot of people, is that when I found Krav, I was like, holy shit, where has this been my whole life? Because my father had passed, I talked about that previously, but my father really wasn't in my life, so I didn't have guidance. I didn't have that father's figure. And so I was trying to figure it out. I was trying to figure out who I was as a man and where I was going in my life. And Krav gave me something. It gave me something inside of me that I was like, hey, this is relieving that internal pressure that builds up, which, I couldn't explain. I found out over the past few years about what that pressure was, where that anger comes from, because it's still there, right? It's never gonna go away. But it's also why I love Krav. So again, that gave me that outlet, right? I got to hit things. I got to get out the stress, because prior to that stress that built up, that insecurity, that anxiety, it came out in the form of yelling at people, hitting things, inanimate objects, broken left hand. Maybe another story, another podcast. But it gave me that outlet. I could go in there, I could get out my frustrations, and I felt so much better afterwards. And that kind of relief, that's what I get super excited about when I have people that come in our doors and they talk about the struggles that they're having internally. And I can relate to that because I've experienced it. And Krav changed my life, and in a way it saved my life. And that's what I get so excited to share with people, like when they come to our training center, is that opportunity for them, right? To watch that moment happen when they get the relief, when they find that there's a better way out there. And so that's really why I fell in love with Krav. And then secondarily, I found out I could be good at it. I wasn't a great athlete. I mean, I played high school sports. I was in football. We were 4-time state champions in Wyoming. We were, we lost one game in the 4 years. So, I had a little bit of sports experience, but was by no means an athlete, right? And I had a autoimmune condition that was undiagnosed. And I'm gonna have a whole episode about that, because that is just a wild, crazy story about what I was able to accomplish while having that. So with that, I realized, hey, I could be good at this, right? Because when I could channel that anger and I had someone to guide me and show me proper technique and form, oh man, that was awesome, right? That's fantastic. So that's really why I fell in love with Krav, is it gave me that outlet, it gave me that confidence that I really needed at that point in time in my life, and gave me a little bit of guidance. It kind of lifted me up out of the fog and started to open doors for me and give me some clarity. It was just a miracle worker in that way. And so that's why I fell in love with Krav. And it's a complete system. Krav Maga is a complete system. Contact combat is a translation from Hebrew into English. So it is a complete system. It's kind of one of the original mixed martial arts, if you will. It's reality-based self-defense. And another point that I wanted to talk about with that is the fact that growing up around a lot of domestic violence, having that in my life, when it came into my life, was for me reflective in the fact of what if, right? What if my mom could have had some training like this? Could she have not suffered as much abuse, right? Could I, as I became a young man, could have maybe stopped some of that? Because ultimately we have to fight back at a certain point in our lives, or we need to get that confidence to leave. And so for me, that's really where it hangs on, is that's the core thing for me of why I fell in love with Krav, is because what if my mom would have had it? Would she have not had the horrible things done to her? Would my sister and I not have had the horrible things done to us if we could have been out of that situation? So that's another thing that I love about Krav Maga and what it gave for me, and what I love that opportunity when I get people that come in our doors. And I've had that. I will share stories down the road about how people have come to me with domestic violence in particular. Very touching, very touching. So we're not going to go quite there yet. But where I wanted to go to next, and by the way, look, I got a list here so I can kind of stay on track with you guys this week. Okay, so listen, I'm working in Spokane and I'm at Avista. So I haven't quite quit yet. I know I ended the last episode with, hey, I quit and I started my own place. But as I was still working at Avista, I was training to prepare to go test for my first level certification. So I wasn't officially open, but I needed to train. So what did that training look like? Because I had no idea what I was getting myself into. Again, I did high school sports and I was doing CrossFit at the time, and CrossFit kicks your ass. It got me in shape. So I was doing CrossFit, I think about 4 days a week. And I was also supplementing with some shadow striking with Boss Written Systems rounds. I'm gonna have a whole episode about Boss Written Systems, how we tied that in with our training center and how we're not your normal Krav Maga training center. This building here used to be CrossFit Spokane, and over to my right is where the building was that I was training CrossFit at. And so I was just busting my ass. I was working 10 hours a day at Avista as an electrician, and then I was hitting my CrossFit in the evenings, and then I was just shadowboxing and running. So my goal was to get into the best shape I possibly could. And then on the weekends, I was traveling to Moscow. So I would work my 410s at Avista, I would hop in my truck, and I would scoot on down to Moscow. That's where Mike Satz was at, and I trained with him. So that was the training that I was getting prepared for. And the only thing that I could kind of, like, what was I getting myself into were like the Krav Maga classes, right? The Krav Maga classes I had in Boise and the ones that I was getting in Moscow. But I had no idea what I was in store for. So, and I was in great shape, right? Like I said, I said in the previous podcast, like, if you give me a goal on the horizon, I'm gonna do whatever I need to do to crush that goal. And so my goal, I was told by Kirsten, is if you can do Boss's 10-minute shadowboxing rounds, and supplement in between those rounds, 30 seconds of exercise. And if you can do all 10 rounds and you still have gas in the tank, she's like, you're ready for phase training. And so phase training is 7 days. So it's 7 days of training, we're training 8 hours a day. And so that's what I was getting myself prepared for. So, but ultimately I knew that when I got that certification, I needed to walk away from Avista because I was always working out of town at Avista. We were out of town Monday through Thursday, sorry. We were out of town working on different dams and substations. And so that's why I left on Friday. I had Fridays off, I could go down to Moscow. But I knew that I couldn't teach while working at Avista. So I knew that when that moment came, when I got the certification, I was officially gonna open, that's when I had to walk away. So up until that point, I was working full time and I was training my butt off, preparing to go to San Antonio. And so San Antonio, let's transition into that. So I've been busting my ass. I got myself in great shape. I got the tickets purchased. I've got everything all set up. I signed up with Krav Maga Worldwide at that time. That was a great organization, fantastic training that they provided for myself. And it was a good organization that I got involved with in the beginning. And so off to San Antonio I go. And so I took the week vacation, and then afterwards I gave myself a little bit of a bonus of going to the Florida Keys. Kind of talked about that in the previous episode, one of my favorite places to visit. But phase A, holy shit. So that was just such a unique experience. So Pete Hardy was the owner of Krav Maga San Antonio. He had a previous Gold's Gym, I believe somewhere up in Washington State, state that I reside in, and then he went to San Antonio and he opened up right next to like a Planet Fitness or whatever, and he would crush those. He was in an old shopping center. So his training center was 50,000 square feet. I like to joke and say it was like Disneyland for Krav Maga. I mean, there was a shoot house in there. They had a mock airplane, so they did mock hijackings. He had a whole open area where he had a vehicle. They had gutted out all the windows and the motor and everything, but we used that for carjacking scenarios. He had an ATM machine. He had a bag room that was just completely full. I think they had 50 hanging bags in there. So anyway, so that's what I'm walking into, right? I had trained at a couple smaller places, but I had never seen anything like what I saw at Krav Maga San Antonio. So I get there, we meet all the folks, and the training starts. And oh my God, the training was just absolutely just the most intense thing, the hardest thing that I had ever done up to that point. The only thing I can correlate it to, I know I'm going back to high school sports, but again, I didn't play anything in college or after that, is the 2-a-day practices, right? So summer is almost over and you start your football practice, those 2-a-days kicked your butt, right? It's the only thing that I could correlate it to, but it was that and more. I mean, it was just so intense. They had instructors from different parts of the country there, and I mean, they were there to make you into a fantastic instructor. And so it not only included the physical aspect of it, of working through the techniques, but also the teaching components of it. And they had a fantastic structure of how we, to this day, teach our students and transfer that knowledge. And so I'm just consuming this in, right? And keep in mind, I'm in great shape, but I mean, you can be in the best shape of your life, but when you're getting beat down on for 8 hours a day, like it takes its toll. So I remember going into the hot tub in the pool, after we're done training for the day, just to try and loosen up. And side note, just super, super sore, right? Met some great people there. I had a couple of guys there that were MMA fighters. I believe they were out of South or North Carolina. Super cool guys. One of them was actually in a Shinedown video. Shinedown is one of my favorite bands of all time, and I think they're from that same place. But anyway, I didn't know it at the time, but he had alopecia. So he had no hair. So he had no eyebrows, no hair. And after a couple of days, we were kind of all go to lunch. We get a lunch break. So we trained for like 4 hours. We would get a little bit of a break and come back and train for about 4 more hours. And so we're walking in, and he was an intimidating guy. And I just asked him, I said, hey man, what's up? How come you don't have any hair? And he stops and he looks at me and he goes, I had cancer. And I was like, oh my God, dude, I'm so sorry. And he just started busting up and he's like, no, dude, I got alopecia, with that South Carolina, North Carolina accent. Super cool guy. And anyway, so having him around was also great. I trained with a great guy named Christian. Christian actually reached out to him recently. In one of the training, he had taken so much damage to his leg. So he was training with somebody and we're working on kick defenses. So always in phase training, you're gonna train over the material that you're gonna get certified on if you pass, and then also the next level or the next belt, if you will. So that's why there's so much material just shoved into these days. And so we're working on a lot of kick defenses, and inside the kick defenses in particular with that lead leg. And so checking those is something you want to do a couple times, but not as much as he did. And so we did a bad class. And remember, I talked about the room that had like 50 hanging bags in it, and the music was loud. And that bad class, I think it lasted for almost an hour. I mean, there were people puking on the side. You could smell it in there. It was just like hell, right? But I mean, we're all pushing through, right? Because nobody wants to quit. And so after, we're all kind of hanging around in the lobby and we're recovering, getting ready for our next, segment, whatever we're going to be training. And Christian was kind of complaining about it. He's like, oh man, he's like, I'm just super tired. He's like, my leg just won't stop hurting. And so we're all just like, well, dude, what's up? What's up with the leg? And back in the day, we trained mainly in pants. We had training pants. We didn't do it in shorts like we do now. And so Christian drops his pants and his leg was just completely chewed up. And if I can, I'll post a pic up here so you guys can see it. And so we're like, oh my God. And so of course, everybody's pulling out phones to like, look at this leg, right? Because the leg is just dark, dark purple and his whole thigh was just completely covered. And there was a nurse there that worked for Pete at that Krav Maga training center. And she was kind of a buff gal. And I remember we're all kind of gathered around and she caught eye of it. And she came in and she started shoving people aside. And she's like, everybody shut the fuck up. And so we're all like, oh my God, oh my God. And so she looks at Christian, she's like, look, you need to answer these questions. How long has this happened? When did you do it? Da, 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 da. So she went through it. She's like, I need to take you to the ER. He had rhabdo in his leg. His muscles were so beat down that they were breaking down into his bloodstream and then your kidneys can't filter it out. So it's called rhabdomyalgia. Anyway, by the time they got him to the ER, they had to go to like 3 different hospitals. He had 17% kidney function. I reached out to him to kind of confirm all this and asked if I could share that story. But I mean, that's just the kind of stuff that we're willing to put ourselves through to become Krav Maga instructors, right? And just first level Krav Maga instructors. So shout out to Christian. Christian recovered from that. It took him a long time. He still has some issues with the leg, but he got certified. He went on, I think, for a couple more levels, but he was a great partner. Another point in that training, I'm with a guy and I'm about 6 foot and I think he was like 6'2", 6'3", and we're practicing our inside defenses. So inside defenses are punches that go down the middle, and so we're defending those, pretty much like a parry from boxing. And I remember his name was Ryan, and we had an instructor that was from Georgia. And Ryan was not punching at the face. And we always say, look, especially in our tests, like you're punching them like you're trying to hit them in the face. That's the only way you're going to learn to defend a real punch, if it's actually coming at you. If it's punching over here or here, it's not a real punch. So he comes up and he's like, Ryan, if you don't punch Brayson not square in that jaw, you're not going to pass. And I go, come on, Ryan, just send it. And so he sends it, and I felt like what I thought was like a fingernail scratched me. And we're going back and forth one for one. And he's like, hey, Brayson, you're bleeding. And I'm like, it doesn't matter, dude. It doesn't matter. Just keep going. And I hear from all the way across this giant training room, and he's like, Buckner, go and stop bleeding. So I had to go off the floor, and we're so fatigued. One of the girls that tried to butterfly stitch me up, she was so fatigued and shaky that she could barely get it up. And so finally I'm like, just jam Vaseline in there, whatever we had. We had something to kind of stop the bleeding because we needed to get back out to training. But that was the final day of testing. I couldn't even write at the end because we had a written part of it. Like I said, the training was intense, the training was thorough, and it made great instructors. And so that culminated, and so we got it all done. But the shitty thing is we didn't know if we passed or not. They always kind of held off. And sometimes it would be a week, sometimes it would be 2 weeks. So you don't even know if you passed, you just know that you survived, right? So 7 days of training, and I treated myself with a trip to the Florida Keys afterwards. I almost missed my flight off of that. But it was an insane experience. It proved to me that I was capable of so much more than I ever thought I could do. Again, it was the most physically demanding, mentally demanding thing that I had ever done in my life. And after I got done with that, it was like, holy crap, I did this, right? And I felt that after every single belt test. I felt that all the way up through black belt. And I remember each one of those just like it was yesterday. It was super intense. And so I always get excited for belt testing because I think it's the closest thing that people would experience what we've experienced as instructors to get there. And you always earn your belts in Krav Maga, especially here at Krav Maga Spokane. But yeah, so that was the phase training aspect of it. And so now I'm a level 1 instructor. And so now I get to open my school, which is very unique in martial arts world. It's not very common. Krav Maga is not a super popular one. There's not a lot of it around like there is jiu-jitsu and whatnot, but this is where I was at. And so now I was at that point, like, okay, so I took my vacation, I come back, and I think I got an email. I don't think you get like an official like phone call or anything like that, basically saying I passed. And so now it was like, okay, well, now's the moment, right? Here it is, the line in the sand, right? I can't keep working at Avista. If I want to open up my own training center, I need to step away from that so I can teach. And so that's when I made that call to basically say, hey, I would like to be laid off, and went into this. Now, to start off with, I was only teaching inside of CrossFit 2 days a week. And so I knew, hey, I could do this, but I was not making much money at all. And I was fortunate enough to pay off the car I had at the time. I had super cheap rent. So basically I was kind of like living off of top ramen and beans and rice, as they say. But as the membership grew, and it wasn't a lot, mind you, I knew I needed more classes. And Mike, he was super awesome to give me 2 classes a week, but I knew if I wanted to grow, I needed more than just 2 days a week, 2 classes, right? You're not gonna grow off of that. And keep in mind, I have no previous business experience. I did not go to college for this. I went to a little bit of college and then I did a trade school, but like, I'm not a business guy. I'm an entrepreneur, but I wasn't a business guy. But I'm like, let's do this. And keep in mind, this is 2008, 2009, right? In that transition period there. And if you guys know your history on that, that was the Great Recession. So as I'm getting ready to make this jump, as I'm growing my membership and I see, hey, I've outgrown this, I need to go to my own place. Where am I gonna get the money from? That was the big thing, right? Like I didn't have stacks of cash sitting around. So I was like, okay, well, let's go get a small business loan. That's what I've heard about before. And you're gonna need a decent amount of money to purchase equipment, to get the lease, right? Never done a lease before, so I needed to find a realtor to help me. I used to be a realtor, but I was not commercial realtor, and I also didn't have my license in Washington State. It was just in Idaho. So I need to find, how am I gonna do this? How am I gonna procure the money to open up the gym? So I started going around to the banks that, Chase and all the others, and it's like, hey, you need to show us some returns, some tax returns from your business before we can give you a business loan. And I'm like, well, how am I going to show you tax returns if I can't have the money to open the business? And they're like, well, that's what you need, because everything had changed on lending at that time. So no one was lending money, especially to someone who just wanted to open a business. I couldn't show them anything. I couldn't show them that I was going to have any income. It was just like, hey, give me some money and hopefully it works. So nobody was loaning me money. And so that was a tough point in time where I'm just like, what do I do? I don't have anybody that I can just go and, hey, can I borrow some money from you to open a business? That's not going to happen. So the only resource that I knew I had was I had my retirement from my union pension. And it wasn't a lot of money at that time. I had been working as an electrician for about 12, 13 years. So I had been contributing into that for 12 to 13 years. So there was an okay amount of money in there, but it wasn't stacks of cash. And so for me, I saw that as that's how I can get the money, right? Now I knew I was gonna have to pay taxes on it, and I did. I paid big taxes on it, but then I wouldn't owe anybody any money, right? And I've been a big fan of staying out of debt. I never took a loan out to start this business. I haven't to this day, and I encourage those that can do it, just bootstrap it, do it that way. Don't have that pressure of owing somebody money. That's just my 2 cents on that. So I spoke with Kirsten. And Kirsten is a huge person in my life. We're gonna have her on the podcast someday. She's the reason I got involved with Boston Systems. She's the wife of Oneness Fish, another great mentor of mine. And so I was talking to her, and I remember clearly I was driving down the freeway, and I asked her, I says, hey, what do you think about me cashing out my retirement to start this? And she's like, Brayson, if you promise yourself to put that money back in there, she says, I say you go for it. And so I did it. I went in and I cashed out, I think I took out $50,000. So I took out a majority of it, and I took a big portion of that and I paid heavily on the taxes on that. But I purchased all the equipment. I got the first month out, set up for the lease, and then I lived off the rest, right? Like I said, I was living off of beans and rice, but I still had a few bills, electric and whatnot. And so that was how I got things started, I took a gamble on myself. It was a big gamble, and I held true to what Kirsten said, pay it back. I had paid it all back, super proud of that opportunity. But when I decided to go all in, you got to go all in, right? And that was the only opportunity that I had. Nobody was going to loan me any money. And so, sometimes when you have a dream, you kind of just have to just go for it, right? And that's what I did. And it's been 17 years, and looking back on that, I'm just like, yeah, I'd totally do it all over again. And funny thing is about maybe it was more than a couple years afterwards, the banks that I went to ask for loans started reaching out saying, hey, would you like to come in and apply for this loan? And I was like, where were you about 2 years ago, right? So yeah, I declined them all because I'm like, I don't need your money now. I already got my own money out of that. But look, it goes to show you, if you have a dream, you have a passion, if you can go 100% all in on that, you can make your dreams come true. So, because I walked away from Avista to do this, and it's just been super rewarding. And so that is going to kind of bring us to the close of episode 2. I appreciate everybody, all the feedback that you guys have given me so far. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. We will be bringing on some guests going forward, and I do plan on expanding and telling stories. I've got some fun stuff coming up for you guys. So I hope you guys all subscribe. I hope you enjoyed it. Give us a like, give us a thumbs up. And if you're ever interested in coming and training with us here at Krav Maga Spokane, go ahead and go to our website, kravmagaspokane.com. Take care, and we'll see you on the next episode.